Rasmussen is joining us now, the number one pollster in all of America. Why? Well, because it's the only polls I follow. Why? Well, because he's right all the time. You've got to sign up for his newsletter, Pete. Pete, do it right now on the phone. You got to sign up for Scott's newsletter. Just go to scottrasmussen.com.
Johnny, I'm already on. I've been on his newsletter for. Of course. How do you think I have all the best information? Right?
It's
the best sources.
scottrasmussen.com.
Scott's a great guy.
He knows it. He knows it all.
Fox contributor. I've known him from many green rooms, and he nails it. He nails it.
Also, did you buy his book, The Sun is Still Rising?
Well, you gave it to me for Christmas.
See, I've had a big heart. I love that book. See, Scott, I buy multiple copies of your book and give it away to my friends at Christmas. I mean, that's what. I mean, come on, Scott. I'm the man, right?
Absolutely. I think getting that book out is one of your greatest public services.
I know, because it's so optimistic. And the business I'm in, it's all down and dour. You got all these people telling me the economy is going to crash, and because some farmer in Iowa can't sell a soybean to China, it's going to be economic Armageddon. We're all going to die or something. Whatever is they're saying on the Clown News Network. But before we get into politics and polls, okay, Scott, we're in a horse race here. We're in a horse race, Scott. Astros 91-50, big comeback victory last night without Springer. Yankees 92-49, 8-2 over their last 10 games. They had a 2-game winning streak, and they got a 1-game lead over us for the best record. I want those 4 games at home in Houston, but it's tough, man. I mean, you guys 92-49, you never lose.
Well, that's a good thing. And, the real issue here is, and the really encouraging sign is that the Yankees starting pitching has looked pretty good lately. Paxton has been the guy we wanted him to be. Tanaka has been coming back. Severino is going to be pitching for us in a couple of days. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. I think the challenge for both teams is, on the one hand, you really want that home field advantage. Obviously, the Yankees would love to have it here in New York, but you also want your players to be rested, and I think there's going to be checking out a lot of things, and so I think it's going to be fascinating, and hopefully the New York Yankees will then go on and have the home field advantage against the Los Angeles Dodgers as well.
Well, look, the Dodgers. What's the Dodgers? I think they've won 4 in a row. They're 92-50, so they're right there. So you got 3 teams virtually within a game of each other. It's going to be tough, but I know the Astros want it because their manager the other day, I saw his press conference. They asked him about it, and he said, "Oh, we don't care." I'm like, as soon as the manager says they don't care, it's like, yeah, you care, right? It's always the opposite land that these executives and managers play. So I know they care. They did. The Astros winning last evening, but I want the 4 games at home because I remember, Scott, the 2017 divisional playoff championship series with the Yankees. Yankees won 3 games at home. We won 4 games at home. We advanced. You were out. And
I was at that last home game and really expected they would come back for the series. It looked pretty good when they were playing at home here.
Well, they won 3 in a row, and they beat all 3 of our best pitchers, one after the other. And the Astros have never played well at Yankee Stadium. So when the Hinch, their manager, says we're not looking at the record, we don't care, that's a blatant lie. They're playing for that home field advantage. So we'll see how it goes. We gave a lot up for Greinke. I'm not a believer. I just got to say I'm not a believer. I mean, I've seen him pitch 5 or 6 times. And it's tough as an Astro fan, and I'm going to get to politics in a second because, you see Verlander, 15 strikeouts. Then you see Garrett Cole, 16 strikeouts, and, they're throwing 98 miles an hour. And then Greinke comes along with an 86-mile-an-hour fastball and 19 changeups. And it's like, I don't get it, but we'll just have to see. We gave up half of our farm system for this guy, so there's a lot of pressure on him. So far, I'm not convinced.
Well, it's going to be fascinating, and I'm I think the one thing that we can unite on in this is we'll be happy that the reigning world champions are soon going to be eliminated from the playoffs, and
I know,
let's
right?
leave it to the future.
For all you Boston Red Sox fans out there, you guys, you know what? From first to worst, That's my hashtag first to worst. Okay, let's get to politics. You keep doing poll after poll after poll, and Biden keeps winning and winning and winning. Now, poll just came out. Biden's still at 30%. Warren 13, Sanders 16. It doesn't matter what Biden does. He manages to stay in front. But it kind of reminds me, Scott Rasmussen, of Giuliani. What was that, 2008?
Yeah.
Remember he had the lead the entire time? He was 35%, 30%, 35%. He had the lead the entire time. I forget who was in it, McCain and Romney and Huckabee, and he was at 35%.
Well, it was actually 12, I believe. No, was that? Yeah. Boy, you're right. That was 8. And he led all the way until the first votes were cast. And then he was out of the race within a month.
Yeah,
look, there's two possible models that Joe Biden is following. One is Giuliani, which you just described. The other is, take your pick, Mitt Romney or Hillary Clinton, where he's just not exciting the base, but somehow nobody can topple him, so he ends up there. I've been pointing out lately that the only question that matters on the Democratic side is whether Joe Biden is really the front runner. You know, his polling in early states is not as strong. If he loses a couple of early races, will that dent his inevitability? And the reason this matters so much, 42% of Democrats right now say they're either voting for Joe Biden or they're not sure who they're going to vote for. If Biden stumbles, all of those votes are up for grabs. And, you know, we're talking about the rest of the field getting 5%, 12%, 16%. The Democratic race will be wide open if Joe Biden is not the nominee. Sanders and Warren have the best shot among that group, but it's impossible to predict.
I agree with you right there. And if Biden loses Iowa, it is the Giuliani scenario. And I don't think he's going to win Iowa. If he loses Iowa, he's not going to win New Hampshire. You can forget that. It's going to be Sanders or Warren. So if you really look at this, Scott Rasmussen, this is a fascinating race because if Biden loses Iowa, it becomes wide open. And then Warren or Sanders, either of those two are going to win New Hampshire, in my judgment. And whoever loses is out. I mean, if Sanders gets beat in New Hampshire, he's done. If Warren gets beat, she's done. So one of those two are going to emerge. I personally think Sanders is going to win Iowa and New Hampshire. And then the battle goes to South Carolina. Biden will probably stay in, and that's where he's got to throw down the gauntlet. And if he can't win there with Kamala Harris in, he's done. I mean, I don't think he'll make it to Super Tuesday.
Well, there's something else that I don't disagree with anything you said, but you're leaving one big part of the story out. On the day that the Iowa caucus takes place, early voting begins in California. You know, there's this early 4-week stretch with just one state at a time, and they're smaller states. But the week after South Carolina, the Democrats have their first Super Tuesday, and over an 8-day stretch, over 2 Tuesdays, they will elect 47% of all their delegates. So if the field is muddled, if there's no clear front runner after Iowa, while those early votes are being cast in California and we're gearing up for this, for the Super Tuesday events, it's quite possible that nobody will emerge with a majority of delegates going into the Democratic convention.
So we could get to Milwaukee, and nobody's got the number of delegates needed. And an interesting thing here, Scott Rasmussen, is that the Democratic Party did away with the hated super delegates after the Clinton-Sanders stealing the nomination fiasco in 2016. But what a lot of people don't realize, Scott, is that's only on the first ballot. As soon as the first ballot is over, the super delegates come back into play. Could you imagine this scenario? Bernie Sanders gets to Milwaukee. He has the lead, but he doesn't have enough delegates to get the nomination. He gets to Milwaukee. First ballot, he can't get over the top. Second ballot, the super delegates come in and steal it from him and give it to someone else. Could you imagine that scenario, Pete?
You know, I remember people talking about this exact same scenario 4 years ago. There was a brief moment in time when it looked like Donald Trump would have the most delegates, but not a majority, and what would happen. And we had lots of discussion about this. And bottom line is the voters resolved it because as soon as it became clear that Trump was going to be on top, he started winning everywhere and ended the decision. One of the things we know about the behavior of voters is they're very aware of the context when the vote comes to their state. So if you had, say, 4 or 5 candidates in a race and you were supporting the person who was in 5th place, you're going to be real tempted to throw your vote to one of the top 2 when it's actually election day because you want to impact that outcome. I suspect that what will happen is as the primary season goes on after those Super Tuesdays, Democratic voters will begin to focus on the choice they want. And I don't really think we'll get to the convention without a majority. I think there will be some dealing ahead of time so that we know what's going to happen. But in answer to your question very directly, there's no way the superdelegates will overturn Bernie Sanders if he is leading after the first ballot. If he has a decent lead, at least, it's just not going to happen because it would split the Democratic Party.
Scott, but think about the Democratic establishment. Think about Terry McAuliffe and the Clintons. You can always tell what people are up to, by and large, based on what they're doing on social media and what have you. Hillary Clinton's reemerging in quite a way. I don't think for a second that the entire Clinton machine wouldn't be pushing her as a quote-unquote consensus candidate. I mean, they can't. Scott, you've been around the block. You know these people can't help themselves.
Well, of course. Look, that's their person. They believe that she should be president right now. They believe that she was destined for that moment in history. But again, events have overtaken that. We're now looking at a Democratic Party that believes that Barack Obama was a political moderate, that he was far too centrist. Hillary Clinton is not even on the scale for many of the Democratic activists today. And there's something else that, there is, political activists always like these tactics and schemes. Voters kind of like a fair game, and they would like the idea that if you're going to run for president, you should jump into these primaries and figure it out for yourself. And again, I know a lot of these conversations because we all heard them 4 years ago in that 2 or 3 or 4 week stretch when we weren't sure if Donald Trump would have 50% or more of the Republican delegates. There's scenarios that get floated, but just not likely to happen.
Hey, I hope that's the case, Scott. I hope that's the case, and the Democrats actually trust their own voters. It hasn't been the case in the past, but and but Bernie Sanders has every right to feel that he was robbed in 2016. The whole system was rigged against him.
And that's a big factor this time around because if Sanders is doing well, as a matter of fact, you already see it on social media. He's in second in all the polls, and people are talking about Elizabeth Warren and talking about everybody else, and they feel, wait a minute, this is the guy who deserves it. He really should. It's just like Hillary Clinton believes she should be president right now. Bernie Sanders believes he should have been the Democratic nominee and believes that if he had been the nominee, they would have won.
Well, we'll never find out about that, but you're right. I mean, they are complaining about the media coverage because he's second in almost every national poll, and all the attention is going to other candidates, not him. And so, look, I could understand why they're annoyed by it. Scott Rasmussen, I look at your numbers, and I say to myself, when I look at these, when I got up today, I said to myself, no way Trump loses. For instance, a couple of the right. I mean, let's look at some of the recent polls you've done. If I can beg your patience here a second, right? 72% of Americans want immigration policy to favor those with skills to help the economy. Number one Trump issue. Okay, 56% of Americans support tariffs on goods from China. Cornerstone of Trump's policy. Right? GOP primary, Trump 76%, Walsh 5, Weld 3. So you can forget that. I mean, you go on and on and on. You look at all the underscore pollings that you do, and Trump's positions went out, yet you look at the national polls, and he's underwater. How is that possible?
Well, first off, let's be clear. National polls this far ahead of an election aren't always the best indicator. There's an awful lot of people who say, I like some things that Donald Trump has done, but I'd like somebody who does it in a different manner. So they're looking. We have about 20% of voters haven't really made up their mind yet. And, I think the Democrats start with a modest advantage because they're the party out of power, but it's a long way from over. When you say, is Donald Trump sure to win? Absolutely not. And the biggest question is the state of the U.S. economy. If the economy struggles, if we enter a recession or even have strong indications that a recession is coming, if people begin to feel worse about their own personal finances, then Donald Trump will be in serious trouble. If you make the assumption that the economy keeps going strong, begins to pick up a little steam, then the president is in very good position to get reelected. It's probably still close, probably going to be talking about places like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Minnesota and other competitive states. But really, the economy is the biggest threat to the president's reelection at this point in time.
Well, I looked at some internal polling the last 2 days in Virginia on the Democratic side that some of my friends shared with me, and Trump is underwater with suburban white women. I mean, absolutely underwater. Now, I don't know if that's a national trend, but when they showed me some of the numbers in suburban Virginia, like outside of Richmond, outside of Blacksburg, where Virginia Tech is, outside of in Northern Virginia, white women, which he carried in the last election. I mean, he was losing by 20 and 25. And I'm trying to figure that out. Maybe the economy is better. I mean, everything in their lives are better. Like, why is he under water in these suburban areas with suburban white women? Do you have any idea what's driving that?
Well, it is a national trend, and it is a concern for Republicans, particularly in the House of Representatives and for the potential reelection of Donald Trump. A lot of reasons for it. Again, some of it having to do with particular issues that are focused on. Whenever you do a poll after one of the horrific mass shootings that we have, you do see the president loses some support on the margin. And, so that's an issue that can motivate some people. But a lot of it has to do with tone and style. And the other part of it, and I really can't emphasize this enough, people who live and breathe politics think that a lot of Americans watch the 7-hour marathon that CNN put on the other day about climate change. People who live and breathe politics think that if their team doesn't win, the world is going to come to an end. But the people who ultimately will decide this election, the 20% who are in the middle, the 15% who are in the middle, these are people who are not engaged in the political process. They don't think it's a life and death situation. They don't focus on Donald Trump's policies or what Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal plan is. They're loosely aware of the news, and by the time next year rolls around, they will begin to engage in the conversation and realize they have a choice to make. But their opinions vary pretty widely in the year before a campaign. The base is set. As I said, Democrats probably have a few percentage points more than Republicans in terms of people who are committed to their side right now. But it's the middle that will make that decision.
Scott Rasmussen, we're out of time. Thanks for being with us. More information, go to scottrasmussen.com. That's scottrasmussen.com. Sign up for his newsletter. And don't forget, buy his book, The Sun is Still Rising.